Good morning, Dreamforce. Daniel and I are very proud to be among the very first presenters of this year's Dreamforce, and our topic is a little bit playing with triggers. My name is Christian Sander Knapp. I'm a Salesforce MVP. I co-lead the Munich Salesforce Developer User Group, and I work with Apero, a German ISV in Munich.
And my name is Daniel Stange. I'm a technical architect with DIA, Die Interaktiven, in Germany as well. We're an SI partner. And I'm a Frankfurt user group co-leader. So, that's what you all have been waiting for. This is our main slide. Make sure you know that you make all your purchasing decisions only on currently available product. You will see this quite a number of times. Give $1 each to a charity of your choice when you see it.
Right, so what are we going to do with you today? First of all, we are going to tell you our trigger story, a tale of a trigger, or maybe even a tale of any trigger, how we started out and where we ended up with. We'll then shift gears for the first time. We'll give you an idea how custom metadata types will help you untangle your trigger mess. And then we will be shifting gears again into streams and talk about how platform events can do stuff differently in a way you haven't seen before. And last but not least, we'll give you a few tips how you can apply everything you saw today, and you will not leave empty-handed. Ladies and gentlemen, we brought you a package open source you can take home with called My Triggers, but more on that in the end.
Yeah. Well, we all know when we started back a few years ago, triggers are the kind of glue that keeps our platform together. And when we built our first triggers, we started and made things work, and then we found out that we should keep to several principles about that. For example, we want to keep our code outside of the trigger itself. We want to have it bulkified so that it doesn't hit limits. We want probably just one trigger per S object, but there's a limit to this as well. And we always want to use something to keep exceptions handled. But when you think about triggers, when did you last step back and think about the code that handles your actual trigger logic?
Well, see, it's 2018, and guess what? Change has happened. We're now facing a complete new Salesforce with Lightning Experience, and that is built on asynchronous events. We also got platform events, which also incorporate asynchronous events on the platform. We have new developer paradigms being built up currently, modular packaging, for example. So how do you get by a one trigger per S object rule using modular packages, for example? Well, use my triggers, you will see. And last but not least, there are lots of other platform enhancements and lots of brain power currently being pumped into the platform by great people. So we got dependency injection and all other kinds of enterprise patterns that weren't possible before.
Now, this is a scenario that we had when we first started our business, right? We had an opportunity and that closed, and that means there's a new customer for our business. So we probably wanted to create an onboarding case with a customer support team, and we want to update the account to mark this account as a new one. And this was pretty easy. This is clearly a trigger, and we built it, and it worked, and boom, what a great feeling it is.
Yeah, well, that's how we started. Look what we ended up with. We don't have just one business process, we have several. And without trying to understand every detail in this picture, well, you get the immediate impression, phew, that's complicated, and I wish somebody had thought of every facet of a trigger before me. So what do you do, Daniel? How can we untangle this mess? See, the point is, if you try to start thinking about triggers and take a step back, then you will suddenly realize, well, you can imagine them like cogs, right? Cogs grab into each other. Triggers are state-driven machines. So if one cogs moves, it necessarily moves all the other cogs as well. And as the more cogs you build up to, the more cogs move. And the point is, if one cog breaks and doesn't move anymore, none of the cogs move, and there you have your mess, right? The validation rule somebody picks up. And what's more, looking at that picture, would you know immediately what kind of trigger that is? That little blue cog there? No, you wouldn't. So how could we untangle this mess, Daniel? Tell us.
Yeah. I mean, the most obvious solution is actually uncouple these cogs. And how do you do it? You take them apart, and they don't touch each other, and nothing moves anymore. Now, that's not exactly what we want. We want the cogs to move. So we have to come up with something that is probably quite known in the industry for 100 years. And that's belts, driver belts, conveyor belts that connect these cogs and make them move again, keep them in sync, distributed traction, but without coupling them so hard that they can get stuck. And whenever we need something new in our trigger handler, we can just add another cog, add another belt, and drive the whole system again.
So we were talking about conveyor belts, and this is how a conveyor belt looks on the platform. It's a custom metadata setting, it's a MyTrigger setting, and it tells you immediately for which object this particular setting is active account. You also see which trigger event is there after update. You also can decide on the order in which this particular piece of code should run. And I want to point out in the red square on the left-hand side that you don't have your ordinary trigger handler there. You have a class called new custom initiate order. And what we envision here are as object agnostic business step classes, right? That are able to detect which objects they're dealing with, so you don't really do trigger handlers with MyTriggers in that case. And the cool thing about this is it takes just something as easy as a list view to get an idea what is happening in the org, in which order is that happening, and if you look at the right-hand side, you will see that sometimes we even have settings twice to the same class for 2 different steps, and that's perfectly okay, because they're different entry points, but the same logic, and we want to have the trigger logic more business process focused and not so much platform focused.
Yeah.
From the code side, you need just one single line of code to implement the MyTriggers framework. That's all you have to. And if you're asking yourselves now, well, I don't buy into this as object agnostic business step thingy. I want to do regular trigger handlers. Well, we got you covered there with some extra features in MyTriggers. So, for example, take an account trigger, and for some reasons or other, the account trigger has the job to insert opportunities. With MyTriggers, you can then tell all other triggers in that org on opportunity not to run. Not to run at all, because the account trigger will handle those opportunity inserts.
Yeah. But what actually do you do when there's a cog in your system that doesn't come to a standstill, but is moving just really slow? And we kind of know that we need this little cog to move. Nonetheless, it moves slow. So we have to come up with an idea for this. So what we do here is we extend the reach of our triggers by shooting off a platform event. Events can be used to trigger something on the platform or off the platform and run it in the background. There's no logic in particular to the platform event itself, and it's not even tied to a specific S-object type, so you can give it a payload and work with that. And finally, platform events can jump out most of the contexts, even those that are getting rolled back. And that's really cool.
Yeah, the first use case I thought up when platform events were GA was a robust logger, you know? You save messages and then a rollback comes and the message gets deleted. That's not what a logger is for. And with platform events, you can write persistent logs in disregard of try-catch blocks by shooting out a platform event, for example.
Yeah, and whenever you're listening to a platform event on the Salesforce platform, you all probably know this, it's just another after insert trigger. And guess what? We can handle this with our framework.
So there's one step missing. So if you say you go from a synchronous context into asynchronous context, what about the user? And there where we close the circle to Lightning Experience. As I said, it's an event-driven platform, and what we can use is push topics, for example, and streaming notifications. So what you do is take the new EMP API component in Winter 19, stuff it in the utility bar, and have it listen to your events, and the user doesn't even realize that something runs asynchronously. It's just another toast popping up.
Yeah. Okay, demo time. We have that one process in our org that is something that keeps our users complaining all of the time, and I'm going to show it to you. So here's an opportunity. And then when I update the status, in the more advanced statuses, it checks the stock levels. And that's a heavy loaded process on our platform. See? Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God. That's long.
Okay. That took really long, and that annoys our users. So that's not good, actually. So let me just go and deactivate the synchronous jobs that we run here. It's just a click away with the MyTriggers framework. Go and deactivate this one. And I activate the same process in an asynchronous fashion via a platform event. That's as easy as it is. And let's update this opportunity again to set it to closed one. And again, the platform will check the stock levels, but this time asynchronously in the background. So
boom,
the UI
is
unblocked immediately, and we're waiting for the process to finish. Oh, stock level is low. What we're going to do now? Well, there's a notification in the status bar, and it helps us by just notifying us that the stock levels are low for the product that we chose, but there are two alternatives that we could choose, so we can take it from here without waiting for the platform to react to that data change. So, triggers, events, probably both. What are you going to choose? I'd say whatever best fits your needs. What I just showed you is that we took a long-running process of the context that the user is currently in. So we unblocked the user interface and let this heavy loaded thing work in the past. And that's exactly where you can use events instead of a trigger. You shoot off the event in all cases where you don't want to have the immediate result. And a good place where you can use events is also when you really don't care exactly about integrity of the whole execution context. So whenever you need transaction security, make sure you're in a trigger. Whenever you don't need the immediate reaction of the platform, you're probably safe with pushing that to a platform event. And there's one thing that platform events don't have, and that's the before insert, before update context. You typically use this context to manipulate data before you consume any of the database's limits. So no SOCLs, no DMLs, whatever. You can just manipulate the data before it goes into the platform, and that's exactly where you go for a trigger.
So where could you take it from here? So first of all, whatever we said today is just food for thought, right? Take the MyTriggers framework home with you, play with it, and try to envision a new way to deal with triggers that are loosely coupled, and that's all we're saying. And obviously, there's also Trailhead. So please go and take your chance. Have a look at the Apex Enterprise patterns. Have a look at the custom metadata types badge, and obviously also on the instant notification app, because that one tells you how to build and how to use platform event, right? So what we want to encourage you by using MyTriggers, you see the GitHub repo, and you also see a DCP package you install. Big shout out to my company Apero, who open sourced this, and think about how you would try to break down your org into business processes and not so much into triggers. Yeah. Maybe one thing, right? You saw Daniel proved how easy it is to go into production and swap productivity. So deactivating stuff is really fun, but what's not fun is forgetting to turn it back on again. So triggers keep your system safe in a consistent state. So if you mess around to it too much, please don't do it in production, right? Take the MyTriggers homework, go to a developer console, and play around there. Well, maybe another personal note. When I started doing Salesforce development, I started doing it in a very fast-paced environment. And we grew, and we grew, and we grew, and I hadn't had the time to stop and look back. And then I read those two books up in the slides, and those were totally eye-openers to me. Dan Appelman and Andrew Fawcett completely changed the way how I work with Salesforce and Salesforce code, and ultimately it also led up to the talk today, how we could try to envision a different kind of trigger work.
Yeah.
Also, please have a look at the reference technologies. Make a picture of that last slide, please. Do make one, because those 4 repos can teach you so much, really.
Okay. One last notice before we close. There's a tiny session, the most important one for us developers. Make sure that you see the developer keynote. It's really great fun with great people around. Thursday, 1 a.m. Make us the biggest contributor to the crowd there, right? You all be there? Okay. With that, that's a wrap for this morning. Thank you very much for being here.